Hello, I'm Sarah Donville. I'm a cultural education manager at Curious Minds. And I'm going to be talking to Jude Bird for the next 5 or 10 minutes about collaboration. So, I'd like to introduce Jude to you. Jude is the Director of Programmes at Curious Minds, and collaboration has been a key part of Jude's work, both as a creative practitioner and also in her role at Curious Minds. And she's also written about this subject. So, Jude, my first question to you is what is collaboration? How would you define it?
Well, that's a small question, Sarah. I'm actually going to read you what I wrote because I think it's useful, it's pithy and succinct. So I'm defining collaboration as a process defined by the interaction of knowledge and mutual learning between two or more people who are working together on an intellectual or artistic endeavor towards a common goal, which is typically creative in nature, so kind of product orientated. And the collaborative methods are processes, behaviors, and conversations that relate to collaboration between those individuals. These methods are specifically aimed to increase the success of the teams they engage with in problem solving. So really looking at the kind of mutual approach to that. And I think I want to differentiate here between cooperation, which is something, on a day-to-day basis, because I see cooperation as based on commonality. Whereas I see that collaboration is often based on paradoxes. So it has a level of complexity in there. So how are these individuals coming together to create something new and solve those problems? And why I think it's complex is that it often requires those individuals it's quite zen to be in the moment, to bring what they bring, but be prepared to put quite a lot of it down.
Yeah, and I'm interested in your article that you write about transformation and
Mm-hmm.
and I just wondered, and that actually, in order for it to be collaboration, some kind of transformation needs to happen.
Yeah, I think that there's something about the notion of healthy disruption. So you have a practice, another artist has a practice, you've developed a modus operandi and a way of doing something. But in coming together, you're almost offering yourself to the process of disruption. So, how are you going to think differently, operate differently? And there's a whole research methodology called dilemma analysis. And what I've found in the work I've done is that often where the greater dilemma exists, often the collaboration is richer.
Mm. That's really interesting because that suggests to me that collaboration pushes us outside of our comfort zones as well. It pushes us into new areas and areas
I,
we're not perhaps so au fait with.
I think there is that thing of trusting that process. So knowing what you come with, but it's only when you stand outside that. So I don't think there are things like, expected outcomes, except maybe there's a product. I think that often the learning or the enrichment or the product almost occurs as a byproduct of that kind of it's almost a transmutation as well as a transformation, long on alchemy.
So, Jude, in your work at Curious Minds, you often bring schools and cultural organisations together. What would you say the challenges are to that kind of cross-sector collaboration?
I think schools and teachers are trained in a particular way, so they are often looking for quite specific outcomes. And that ability to really suspend belief and trust in another who has come from a different background is quite a challenge. I think often artists come in, and perhaps if they were in the world of the teachers, they would be senior leaders or head teachers. But it's hard for the schools to recognise that when somebody comes in, you know, with an earring, in relaxed clothing, looking quite different. So I think that sort of codifying is quite interesting. And that ability to hand over power and trust that somebody else will work with your pupils and will work with you and produce something different is a huge process of trust, because I think both are working with different success measures. And the way that it has to work is there has to be real dialogue and real understanding, and a desire on the part of both of those partners to really want to get under the skin of this and create something which is for the benefit of the children and young people they work with. And what often happens in this situation is that the children that have previously shone are not always the ones that shine in a different process. So the light is often shone in a different way and can really bring the non-usual suspects into that situation. So I think different inputs create different outcomes.
Yeah, and it almost goes back to what you were saying earlier about collaboration almost being a process of disruption, because what you're doing there in some ways is disrupting the norm,
Exactly.
in terms of the expectation around the young people. And also, I'm wondering whether there's some kind of element within that of improvisation that.
Look, I think the whole thing is improvisation. I think life is improvisation, but that's where that whole relational thing really kicks in. You know, you have to have your tools, then you have to be prepared to amalgamate those, tease things out. There's a lovely exercise, you probably know it, Sarah, and it's that very simple thing of who's leading and who's following, and it's a hand exercise. And so you can do it in a very specific way and say change. But then there's a very subtle version of that where you don't quite know who's leading and who's following. And I think that's a really wonderful metaphor for collaboration.
Yeah, so everyone is in a way is a kind of a co-learner and a co-facilitator. The
Yeah.
line between the learner and the leader, which is normally very defined in a school, is different.
Well, it merges, it shifts, it changes. And I think it's, you know, it'll lead us beautifully onto the next thing, but I think it's about that ability to trust the uncertainty and believe in the process.
Yeah, so my final question, Jude, this is very kind of fitting given the current situation, is how do you think that the current situation with COVID perhaps opens up new opportunities for collaboration?
I think that, sort of leading on from the last question, we are all in a time of complete and utter uncertainty. And the sort of notion of the real value of working alliances, none of us can sort this out on our own. And I think that some of the best things that will come out of this time are non-usual alliances that will be forged. And, you know, in times, you know, perished the thought of war and famine and plague and pestilence. Everything shifts. And in so doing, the old ways fall away, and a kind of sea change takes place out of necessity. And we are absolutely in that space. And we know that artists are great innovators and great risk takers. And to bring a kind of fresh perspective and to work with their communities of interest, their communities of practice, and likewise educators who've had to find completely new ways of doing things, sort of immediately transforming everything onto a digital platform or to work in blended learning. And so I think that the will be there to collaborate as never before. So I think it is the propitiousness of the time. It will be the zeitgeist of 2020, 2021.
Well, I hope you're right.
I do too.
Thanks, Jude.